At that moment, Julia began to dream big, contemplating what to do with the money. Should she buy weapons or a luxurious house? This made the vampire Cho question intensely. If her purpose here was to defeat the demon lord, why would she need to buy a house? After all, she wasn't planning to settle permanently in this place anyway. Tai Yin-Tu returned with a mountain of food in hand, causing Julia to look at him with a different perspective, unable to help but marvel at how useful his apprentices were. While Tai Yin-Tu sought food, the vampire went to cook them. Julia, having nothing to do, simply went to inform others, casually holding utensils and walking back and forth, accidentally bumping into the table's edge, causing a cup on top to fall, which collided with the shield, instantly disappearing. While no one noticed, she quickly conjured up a sumptuous meal. Those here wanted to request assistance in dealing with monsters in the valley. However, as per the hero's request, they only needed to observe and not take any action, which seemed utterly unreasonable. But the vampire wanted to know what they would do after this incident, regarding the matter of dealing with the demon lord. But for now, Julia still wanted to recruit more capable apprentices before dealing with the useless ones. She was confident in her abilities, believing she could handle them all one-on-one. They needed more apprentices to eliminate and stop the troublesome ones, because these two couldn't carry any weight. Julia was relying on her strength. One-on-one, she could handle them all. They needed more apprentices to combat the tricky ones. Because they were on land, they needed all these complicated things. But if she could fight in the ocean, she wouldn't hesitate to face any opponent, not even the Celestial Knights. But for now, her body wasn't strong enough to confront the demon lord. Just as she had set foot outside the tent, she immediately received a message that they would depart soon. Crossing so many challenging terrains, Julia sensed that the journey was still long. Therefore, their army wanted to rest here for a while before continuing. Julia quickly assessed the situation and warned that things might become serious. It seemed like a gigantic monster, with a face and tail resembling a cat, had appeared. As soon as they spotted it, they knew for sure it was the infamous speechless monster. Without hesitation, they deployed their forces to attack it, overwhelming it partially due to their numbers, catching it off guard. However, Julia was able to recognize that this was a critical moment. She realized that the monster wasn't part of a pack, which meant it would be easier to defeat since it was alone, without the support of its allies. It was likely separated from its pack in order to become stronger, to rise as the undisputed ruler, the king, the alpha who could protect and be protected by all. As humans captured and restrained the monster, using ropes on its horns to subdue it, Julia could see that this wasn't the end. Immediately, the vampire perceived that there was a hidden ace up someone's sleeve. As soon as it finished speaking, a rift appeared on its forehead, resembling a third eye that glowed brightly, unleashing a tremendous surge of supernatural power. Everyone immediately felt the overwhelming magical force, causing them to tremble uncontrollably. They quickly joined forces and fled while Tientu, still confident in its shield, stepped forward, proclaiming, "I'm here." This action dispelled the chaos and fear among the fighters, rallying them under Tientu's leadership. The fairy swiftly employed her proud shield to shield against the incoming wave. However, in an instant, the monster's magic shot directly at Tientu, shattering both the shield and the armor, leaving everyone in shock. Even those who had utmost faith in Tientu were left speechless. After the destructive spell was used, the monster itself disintegrated immediately. Just as people say, it burned brightly and then went out. Seeing the creature dead, everyone mistakenly attributed its demise to the power of the shield. Hastily, they searched for the remains of the giant warrior. The vampire, upon hearing this, quickly advised Julia to hide Tientu, ensuring its existence remained concealed from humans. Fortunately, the thick smoke and dust cloud obscured Tientu's condition, hiding the fact that it was heavily injured and bleeding profusely, beyond anyone's sight. Julia quickly grabbed the child, then tucked them into her own clothes to conceal them, like hiding fruits or rotten vegetables along with the armor. But no sign of the person's body could be seen anywhere. It was impossible to fake that the person had exploded. Therefore, both of them understood each other without needing to say a word. When next to the abyss, it was as if they didn't need to know how much the armor was worth or how long the money had existed. They quickly disposed of everything by throwing it all into the abyss. Before the cruel scene, All their treasures had been dumped into the deep abyss, causing Cho's weak soul to tremble and tears to stream down. The two young men were filled with sorrow, sitting dead in a heap, making anyone passing by turn their heads, as if seeing a strange creature. The reason for this sorrowful situation was that when both went to collect their reward, they couldn't receive it in any way, because the mission contractor, the Iron Giant, had died. So, wanting to avoid the debt, suddenly the fairy from Julia's blood popped up and saw the familiar black head, none other than the captain of the exploration team, who had been born and died with them in the forest. Silent when the mage couldn't believe there was really TINTU in this world, the captain immediately introduced himself and proudly announced that he was now one of the warrior's disciples. So now, he'd come here to find them to report a very important matter. When asked if he recognized or sensed the extremely powerful force that suddenly appeared in the nearby village, the vampire immediately recalled as if he had also sensed it. At first, the captain thought the two were going to find them to warn them, so they hid before the warriors found them. Because this warrior was very strong, stronger than those who had appeared in the forest. So they wanted them to be the ones of the demon tribe. So they ran away, causing Cho to have an awkward expression on her face, always wondering why. Just need to hunt down the one who caused everything. Why do you want to kill us? Making the captain quickly remember the horrifying images. The innocent children had also been buried by the cruelty of that bloodthirsty warrior, only to say that he was such a person, not regretting a few lives. With the motto, it's better to kill by mistake than to miss out. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. The captain quickly moved on, to be able to solve many other tasks. After seeing off the crowd, Julia sat down as if she were the ruler of the world, and Mother Nature began to question her younger sibling's misdeeds. Since meeting this sibling, her peaceful life had been nothing but turmoil. She had lost her wages twice due to insect infestations. Cho quickly recalled their first encounter, which was at the tomb of a king. Just mentioning it made Cho dizzy with sleepiness, but waking up abruptly, she shouted out loud and eagerly urged on, saying that the tomb of the demon king was nearby. It had been built by the first lord to contain countless exquisite treasures inside. Just hearing about it made Julia's eyes light up, and she wanted to hurry there to find materials for her new shield. When she saw those two people being indifferent, the vampire immediately helped wake them up with just a glance at her face. "Your eyebrows are messed up," she said, causing Julia to quickly mute her microphone. Tailantu's strong questioning made her feel like she was in a trance. At this moment, another group of explorers was telling a story about being trapped in a maze for a month, thanks to a very interesting story that was being told to another believer, who was very interested in the outside world. So after being brought to the place by Julia, Tiantu was overwhelmed, because the mountain had completely collapsed. If they wanted to enter now, they had to clear all the debris lying here, but it might not be finished until Tetnainden. However, Tiantu felt something was wrong, and asked Cho again if they had really come here to find treasure and the black sword. Indeed, the vampire had contributed to that sword and had been searching for it for 300 years, immediately enlightening them. The tomb of this king was a multi-dimensional space that did not exist outside. Therefore, these layers of soil and stone were just artificially constructed to prevent intruders from taking the treasure. The first demon king was extremely invincible, but was defeated by the human king. However, whoever lives in this world doesn't control the fate of the world. Killing the demon king was just a thing of the past when he was defeated by old age. Therefore, he passed on all his power into the sword and buried it because there was no time to choose who would truly possess it. So it could only be left there for whoever was most suitable to find it. When the human king passed away, it was also the moment when the demon race invaded once again. So the king's last words were, "I will keep my treasure and bring it down to the grave, waiting for you." That legendary story seemed nothing more than a fable to the two of them. It was like telling bedtime stories to children. When Julia saw Tientu trying to lure them into finding a way to enter the tomb, the vampire immediately realized that this clueless kid didn't know anything about the path. This made Cho sweat as she tried to defend herself, saying she already knew roughly what to do. Based on Julia's map, the master and her apprentice estimated that they could reach there within 2 days. Seeing Tientu being even more useless than herself, Cho thought it was a bit off, so she reluctantly had to point out the correct location. Once they knew where to go, they quickly wanted to pack up and leave. However, suddenly, A person ran out from the road in a panic, so scared that they fell flat on their face on the ground. It turned out that it wasn't a human because they had horns on their head. But what caught the attention of the vampire was the shackles on the person's arms and legs. Couldn't help but marvel. This must be a human's pastime. The person then weakly asked in their voice, "Hey, are you a demon? Please save me." No sooner had they finished speaking than something attacked their leg from the forest, and a figure carrying a giant club appeared. The one who had attacked the creature. Seeing the two of them staring at him, the hunter showed his resentment and threatened. "What are you looking at? You want me to gouge your eyes out right now?" With such a weak attitude that they liked to show off. The vampire immediately confirmed that this guy was indeed a rookie, just starting out in the business. So, to help the young man, Yuria took out a small sword from her body, which Cho called the mini holy sword, causing even the fairy beside her to frown. "Why are we going crazy again? Crazy again and heading towards death?" But the vampire knew her true power well. Although she couldn't use it now, the opponent was just a weak human, even easier to deal with. This made Tientu worried. Was she planning to kill that human? In the face of the scrutinizing gaze of the creature, facing a person who, although human, was many times taller than herself, Yuria began to perform a bizarre waiting for cows to dance ritual, raising her hands and shouting continuously, as if a madman fleeing, causing both Cho and her sibling to feel embarrassed, not knowing where to hide. Indeed, they felt ashamed in front of both sides of their family, and concluded with a very authoritative tone. "Those who see this technique will surely die." This made the guy who had been arrogant, until now frozen stiff from fear, quickly regaining consciousness, but feeling something was off. His mind became hazy, as Julia's seemingly meaningless maneuvers struck a psychological blow, making him anxious and cautious. And when he no longer saw her within his sight, he officially fell into the trap of fear. Based on his experience, he began to follow every step and movement of Yuria, fearing that if he lost sight of her, he would become the victim, which was exactly what she intended. Faced with someone who was very familiar with combat, Yulia's small body would make him less alert. This would become a barrier, so she performed those strange movements to make him feel irritated and experience a fight he had never had before. The result was that due to his anxiety, his vision would be narrowed, focusing solely on Yuria, and she immediately used a stealth technique, seemingly speaking to him, but actually just bluffing and throwing sand into his face, causing him pain and gnashing his teeth. "You little punk, I'll kill you." He predicted, based on Julia's movements so far, that she would always be below and gradually approaching him. So he immediately raised his sword and struck down, expecting her to be split in half. But instead of blood splattering everywhere, he only heard the clashing of weapons against the ground below. He quickly blinked his eyes, but when he opened them, he saw Yuria stomping on his sword and pointing a knife at his throat. That human quickly found himself tied up like a rice cake. As for the vampire part, once again, staring relentlessly without blinking, making the little Cho feel intimidated, hiding behind Julia's petite figure, seeing her intending to recruit the supernatural being to become her right hand, prompting Cho, the human, to immediately and defiantly declare that it is not a human, as they mistakenly thought, and that humans and demons being close together is akin to seeking one's own death. This made Cho question fiercely, with an extremely stupid expression, "Didn't I say I'm human?" Even though Cho had already left, the vampire still harbored resentment within, knowing that if they let that kind of human survive, it would be difficult to live with them in the future. Immediately, Tientu also followed suit, bringing out the head of the deceased from under Julia's coat, causing the little creature to be utterly shocked. Just seeing Yuria turning back to look at him immediately brightened Cho's spirit. The face, though, whenever seeing the vampire, would instantly become horrified, because not only was the face sealed in appearance, but it also lacked any expression whatsoever, and extending its hand, making Cho, a human, not afraid, was strange too. Yet it used its hand to hit the neck of the scared little creature, making Cho shudder, but even more shocked when the vampire affirmed that someone had cursed him already. The probability is that while being interrogated, being starved, at the weakest moment, the curse would be easily put into him immediately, making Cho, the creature, remember and turn pale. Indeed, there were such painful memories. But now that wretched name no longer exists in this life anymore, with an extremely weak and terrified appearance. Its hand had terminated him. As soon as the vampire heard this, it knew it was doomed. Impossible to dispel the curse. causing Cho and Julia to become rigid and expressionless. Even though Cho had some understanding of the curse, it was exactly like the one she had imposed on him, the command curse, making Cho ponder for a while, then asking a seemingly absurd question, needing to dispel it, perhaps seeing Julia still unaware of the danger of the command curse the creature was suffering. Tientu immediately explained the command curse. If defied, it would cause Cho to be involuntarily cursed to death. Earlier, when the vampire approached the creature, 3 other watches emerged. If they run out, it also means the creature will bid farewell to life from now on. But this kind has its own restriction that only a master can dispel. However, Tientu reassured that it's not hopeless. There's a way to solve it because from what the creature knows, the first human king had the ability to absorb powers from other objects. So the curse will also become a living exchange. Just going to the tomb will reveal it. Hearing this, Julia immediately agreed to take the creature with her. This made the vampire immediately suspicious. Even though not knowing the identity of this one, she dared to take it along. But in Cho's opinion, she was just a single-celled organism, thinking simply of adding another right hand and proudly leading her troops straight to the tomb. But it made the vampire become silent, recalling Julia's naive appearance when mentioning the submission curse, making its gaze sharper, because it could now determine that the curse on itself was not the same as that of the creature. At that moment, while the hero was wandering, he suddenly sensed a murderous aura and stopped abruptly. It was as if, right in front of him, emerging from the bushes, the warrior had attacked his companion. Despite this, the warrior showed no mercy, affirming boldly before him that he had already eliminated those 2. This enraged the hero, who swiftly drew his sword and charged forward to demand retribution. Confronted with the formidable blade of the hero, the warrior remained unperturbed, seeming to have shifted his position at high speed, causing the hero's attire to flutter in response. Could he be the ghost of July? The hero recalled the name of this warrior, who often carried a large book with him. Yet now, he was nowhere to be seen. Just as he turned back, something massive launched an attack. Fortunately, the hero reacted in time, using his sword to cleave it in 2. But its strength was overwhelming, causing the hero to be thrown backward. Meanwhile, the warrior, maintaining his nonchalant demeanor, claimed that the hero had simply taken his seat at the altar to admire the naked chicken. From the thick dust and smoke, countless swords emerged, hurtling straight towards them, akin to a volley of arrows. Yet, even as he dodged, he didn't forget to count the 6 swords, and he correctly deduced that 1 remained unaccounted for. So, despite his deliberate ambush from behind, he was still caught off guard. However, he had to make sure that the hero didn't suspect anything. When the hero lunged directly at him, using his sword towards his neck, it vanished. That figure was falsely named Canada, recently featured in his video. Yet now, he reappeared from behind, claiming to be a warrior. Immediately, he asserted his right to eliminate all threats to humanity, his eyes ablaze with hatred, as his words were exceedingly foolish. Borrowing the phrase, "botat lives," he sounded no different from a murderer. He then extended 2 fingers to justify his actions, stating his need for 2 missions. First, to eliminate the enemy and eradicate those who pose a threat, he accused the hero of concealing the 2 missions. Seeing the warrior's foolishness, which was raised to the standard of the demon clan, the hero immediately refuted that notion. He argued that humans should not be targeting demons, but rather cruel individuals. However, the warrior disregarded his words and tore out a blank page from his notebook. Immediately, the hero executed his technique, leaving his sword hanging on a thread, while simultaneously the other swords were uprooted from the ground. However, something peculiar caused the hero to freeze instantly. It was the aftermath of the massive explosion earlier, leaving a residual shock. While the warrior continued his rambling, his paper was gradually disappearing into nothingness, until not even a shred remained. He then mentioned the number of swords wielded by the warrior, catching the hero off guard. Just then, the 2 remaining swords appeared in his attire, piercing into his body. After killing someone, the warrior put on a false face and apologized, referring to Julia in a derogatory manner, despite knowing she wasn't human, and that he was the one who tasked her with surveillance, even aware of the giant Iron Man. In this moment, memories flooded back to the hero's childhood, where he wrapped himself in a scarf to pretend to be a hero, playing with a group of friends, including a black-haired boy, who would become his comrade, and a girl with pink hair. Suddenly, they noticed a familiar shadow without a face or form. In the blink of an eye, he returned to the present, bloodied and bruised. Despite the pain, he looked back at his homeland, where only he and his black-haired friend remained alive. They glanced at each other, and despite the fear, he struggled to stand up, shielding his unconscious friend from the sharp claws of the monster. At that moment, he thought his life would end there, just a child who had never even learned swordsmanship. But by some miraculous means, his cry made the monster disappear, and from then on, power surged through him, leading him onto the path of a hero. Looking back, he witnessed a blind swordsman, though he thought he was only dreaming at the time. Now he couldn't remember what the blind swordsman had said, and seeing himself unable to stand, Julia's shadow quickly stirred, helping the hero regain consciousness. But upon seeing those two tufts of hair, the hero couldn't remember who she was. After reflecting on himself, he finally remembered things about her. Maybe he had been indulging in too many sweets lately. A voice echoed, pulling him back to reality. "Smarten up a bit, hero," it said, jolting him awake and gasping for air. Fortunately, he hadn't yet reunited with his grandparents. Feeling his power fading away, he didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the voice from before commanded him to draw out his sword, startling him awake. He pulled out a small sword from his pocket, and immediately felt a surge of power as he saw the sword glowing. The holy sword cursed the face of his opponent, mocking him as a fool who thought he could seal him away. From the beginning to the end, that thing had witnessed everything, even connecting the beginning to the end. The demon warned those who were about to weep, begging for mercy, as his holy sword would claim their lives. Instantly, the hero brandished the sword, unleashing bolts of terrifying power that caused the ground nearby to explode. The hero combined with the holy sword, which was beyond the opponent's expectations. He exhaled a breath and lunged straight at him with sharp eyes. Then, he swung his sword decisively, but the opponent could still shift behind him. However, the hero didn't give up easily. He played big and thrust his sword at lightning speed, almost hitting the opponent's face. Knowing that he couldn't listen to reason, the opponent had no choice but to dodge and evade. But the sword fell into the hands of the awakened spirit, the holy sword in the form of Yuria, the dragon demon, striking a blow that severed his body in two. However, the resilient opponent used his book to make his body heavier and float in midair. The holy sword became furious and would gather its strength for the next attack, creating continuous streams of light that struck with each collision, shattering rocks and earth. But suddenly, the sword noticed that the hero was drifting away with his soul lost in the river, his fighting power depleted. Meanwhile, the hero on this side had fallen asleep due to the excessive loss of blood, no longer needing to stay awake. After rubbing his eyes several times, he finally realized that the surroundings were filled with the red haze of the resilient opponent's control. After being reassured by the holy sword that it was not something to fear, the hero immediately sprayed his sword, pushing it back a bit, much to the hero's astonishment. Finally, the hero placed his trust in it and drew his sword to strike a fatal blow. But on the other side, the opponent quickly used a magical symbol to bind him. But when the resilient opponent thought everything was under control, the hero immediately burst into flames in front of him, fiercely attacking with a nearly crushing blow. Exhausted, the hero exclaimed, "Even the holy sword is constantly shackled." Now, the hero and the holy sword have merged together. The resilient opponent's nose was bleeding, but he still didn't know how strong the hero was. But in this world, one warrior was enough. Immediately, a gigantic magic seal appeared in the sky. Within the range of that seal, trees were quickly split in half, sweeping away everything to leave an empty land, causing the hero inside to endure extreme pain, continuously bleeding from his mouth. Seeing the hero now so weakened, with no ability to fight anymore, the holy sword reached out to help him grasp onto life. But sadly, it was clear that there was still enough strength to block that blow and retaliate. Thankfully, the holy sword stood in front of him as a shield, but the hero was now too weak. His eyes couldn't stay open, and he fell unconscious. The protective barrier of the holy sword was gradually being destroyed before his life was about to end. It comforted him, saying that his legacy would be passed down to future generations. And then it disappeared. Remembering the memories when the green-haired person asked him why he wanted to become a warrior, the hero had to say that it seemed like that thought had always been in his mind since he was very young. Despite many difficulties, he always believed that with hard work, One day he would become someone important, with the responsibility of a warrior, because no matter what, there was only one mission: to fight the demon lord and restore peace to humanity. Because he knew that if he didn't fulfill this duty, it would be passed down to future generations. Now he just had to try a little harder, and his last words were full of confidence that he would succeed. But now, he lay there unconscious, with weak breaths, and from within the shadow of the resilient opponent, another figure emerged, completely covered, saying, "We're here to claim the hero's body," endlessly praising its talent. Truly very useful, able to keep the body intact. Suddenly, two beams of light appear under the feet of that person, and by the time they realized it, they had been attacked by something. But to their astonishment, that thing didn't seem to have suffered any harm, despite their sighs of relief for narrowly avoiding it. Having died once before, they glanced over to where the hero had been, only to find their position empty. Instead of showing concern, however, that person laughed heartily. After all, they had lost to the explorers' team earlier, and now the disappearance of the hero turned out to be because the team captain had arrived. Upon seeing that the enigmatic figure was accompanied by the warrior, the team captain knew that the two of them belonged to the same sect. After confirming, their companion promptly announced that the hero had indeed ceased to breathe, causing the team captain to pause in shock. But then they suppressed the pain, thinking optimistically that they had obtained the body, rather than handing it over to them. The enigmatic figure then asked the blurry person what their next move should be. However, they had exerted too much energy earlier, so their only option now was to leave. After all, their goal of killing the hero had been accomplished. Fighting against all three of them at once was impossible, especially alone. Nevertheless, the team captain knew that ultimately, only they would suffer if they fought to the end. Therefore, they could only stand by helplessly as they watched them disappear, vanishing right in front of their eyes. The female sorcerer couldn't bear to see this, feeling uneasy about letting them escape like that. But the team captain understood the current situation well. Now was not the time for confrontation. Losing the body would be a huge setback. Meanwhile, Julia's team had finally reached the luxurious castle, only to find it covered in moss and grass. According to the vampire's knowledge, this place had existed for over 2,000 years. Seeing this scene before her, she didn't know how to proceed to enter. Immediately, she looked towards the vampire. But now was just a useless relic, as the youth no longer had the ability to use their wings for flight, thanks to someone's grace. However, before they could do anything, a guard immediately apprehended them right on the spot, as they appeared rather suspicious. One less handsome, one child, and one trying to conceal themselves like a wanted criminal. But only those with authority or newly recruited explorers could enter this place. However, it seemed that the guard was extremely professional and passionate about their job. "Do whatever you want, but don't cause trouble during my shift," they said sternly. And so they left, leaving the others to deal with the situation. Despite the warning given, it was as if a bunch of country bumpkins had arrived, one fresh from the depths of the sea, one a demon, and another from the forest, completely oblivious to what the soldier had said. They looked around, seemingly clueless, leaving the anthropomorphic animals speechless but determined. "Just pass through the wall, right?" The demon immediately carried Julia, heeding the vampire's less than serious warning, leaving before things got worse. In an instant, the anthropomorphic beings used their powerful legs to leap straight into the air, landing directly at the fortress. However, upon arriving, they sighed with disappointment. The sight before them was nothing but a deep black hole, far from anything resembling a castle. Tintu and the vampire quickly flew upwards upon witnessing the scene. The anthropomorphic beings quickly explained that they had heard reliable information, not mere hearsay. But the vampire swiftly sensed that something was coming, something rising from below, and what appeared was a nine-tailed fox, leaving everyone astonished. Now the 5 superhero comrades were complete. Long ago, there was an adorable, superpowered fox, weak but beautiful, drawing the admiration of many. But one day, while wandering outside, it was attacked by daring adventurers, causing it to bleed profusely from its nose to avoid further harm. The fox would transform into a human, the wish it had made upon a jade stone. But we were shocked to find the stone in a very mysterious place, the house now completely gone without a trace. Despite a hint of narcissism, or rather, a heap of narcissism regarding their own beauty, it was still a fox with an incredibly tenacious spirit. It had been searching for the stone for 5 long years, and now, upon turning to Julia's face, it wept, pleading for sympathy from any available sources. But upon seeing the vampire's commanding gaze, it quickly straightened up, opting to simply jump off the seat, embracing Julia's face. "Why so tense?" it said, attempting to ease the tension. And now, to summarize the situation. According to the fairy, this place has been around for over 100 years. But as for the fox, they couldn't remember any specific time when they had been injured and then hidden the gemstone in a secret place. It was only 10 years later, 5 years ago, that they were able to roughly pinpoint the location, reducing the timeline from 100 years to 65. The vampire immediately drew attention to the nearby village to investigate. As if there were a significant number of people, a disappearance of such a grand castle might have been recorded. So they immediately assigned tasks to each other. The vampire and Julia would go down to the village together to investigate and gather information, while the other 3 would stay behind to explore the surroundings. They couldn't let the villagers know about the existence of supernatural beings, as it was easy to expose, especially since it used to be a slave. So after the fairy brought her back down, they turned around to join the other 2 exploring the area. After allowing Tie and Tu to ride on their back, the little fox immediately refused to let the fairy sit on their back, even though they didn't bother to ask. When all 3 of them were about to start bickering, only the vampire, whose name had never been known before, intervened, which made the little fox feel a bit chilly but decided to ignore it to avoid trouble. Later on, they arrived at the place where the little fox was delighted to find a house with an old man sitting outside reading a book. Its eyes always seemed to be on that man. After searching for a while, Julia couldn't find any useful information, but it seemed that the vampire wasn't concerned with searching and just stood there pensive with cold eyes. Only when she was called back to focus did she say that she couldn't find anything. It shivered because it felt like it had seen that 9-tailed fox before, but couldn't remember. When they saw both of them rummaging through the pile of books, an old man stepped forward to inquire if he could help. After hearing about the king's grave, which made the old lady laugh heartily because it was just a thing of the past and shouldn't be referred to like that anymore. The former capital of the ancient empire, 6 years ago, was engulfed and buried by a devastating earthquake. Seeing her disappointment, she quickly recounted a story that others had been spreading. It wasn't caused by an earthquake, but rather by another force, as witnessed by some firsthand. When she was young and playful, she wandered into the forest and became lost. Despite her efforts, she couldn't escape. Suddenly, a white mist descended, severely limiting visibility. Fearing, she cowered on the ground, and then a violent tremor shook the earth. As raindrops fell, the mist gradually dissipated, revealing the sight of the castle rising toward the moon, meeting Hanga. Because of this experience, the old woman firmly believed the city hadn't been buried but was floating among the clouds. After receiving this information, the vampire quickly grabbed Julia's collar and whisked her away, deeming the search unnecessary. It remembered encountering that fox and the constant chatter about a peculiar stone called a curse artifact, capable of granting wishes to others. Though it didn't fully understand, it was certain the fox had appeared in a distant land 1,000 years ago. While the vampire enjoyed its meal, a young girl interrupted, bearing a message. "My lord has a request for you. I'm unsure if you can fulfill it, but it's merely a plea for temporary shelter, as the fox now looks quite unsightly." Declining the request, it immediately recounted the tale to Julia, who was more interested in teasing the cat and dog. However, the main concern now was why the fox had appeared at that moment, feigning ignorance of the vampire's existence. The complexity of the story left Julia's young mind spinning, prompting her to ask the vampire to summarize it in a single sentence. In response, the vampire's gaze sharpened, suggesting the fox could be their enemy. Therefore, Julia quickly scurried on all fours to join Tientu, eager to assess the situation. The vampire immediately appeared, confronting the fox straightforwardly. "Do you remember who you are?" This statement caused the fox to immediately pale, realizing it had been caught red-handed. "Oh no, busted," it thought, assuming the vampire's memory loss was due to consuming too many sweets and attempting to defend itself. It had thought the vampire had forgotten its presence entirely. Little did it know, the vampire had been aware of its presence from the beginning. It was Julia's group that had arrived later. "Please, remain calm." Raklas, hearing the name for the first time, prompted Tientu to recall. The words spoken by the former leader resurfaced in Tientu's memory. Promptly, it aggressively inquired once more. "What did you say?" "Raklas is your name," it muttered to itself, reeling from the revelation. Tintu had an unwavering rule: no interaction with the outside world. However, one day while resting, it was approached by a group of adventurers who had stumbled upon its dwelling. Rather than fleeing, Tintu was drawn to their captivating stories, shared by a warrior who recounted the tales of 4 individuals and the Tintu. At that moment, it seemed there was no barrier between them. They became friends. But one day, news of the group's demise reached them, leaving Tintu incredulous. The leader's only recourse was to soothe Tintu's rage, as harboring resentment would render staying in the fairy forest impossible. Thus, Tintu decided to leave for another place to live. Despite its adherence to the rule of disengagement from the outside world, the leader's words lingered in Tintu's mind, causing more pain than before. It all stemmed from someone named Zaklat, etched into Tintu's memory forever. Halting the discussion about the past, Tintu underwent a strange transformation. Its eyes turned black, and its body sprouted dry, barren branches, embodying a sense of vengeance. "Demon King, I have come to exact revenge for the warriors," it declared. Instantly, its branches ensnared Raklas's legs, while a strong gust of wind swept Yuria, shielding her eyes as she glimpsed the 2 figures. The fairy immediately sought retribution, intent on ending Raklas's life then and there. However, Tintu, recognizing its own benevolent nature, knew it couldn't overpower Raklas. Waiting for the right moment when the human's bloodlust peaked, it unleashed countless roots, aiming to impale Raklas. As soon as Raklas confirmed the deal was sealed, lying on the table, suddenly its magic seal was broken, immediately startling Cho. Quickly glancing over at Yuria, who remained calmly seated, it was now certain that the curse was a lie. But that didn't matter at the moment. The priority was to address the situation swiftly. Roots immediately wrapped around Raklas's entire body, tightening around it, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Behind, beams of light, more numerous than before, appeared in rings, indicating a doubled strength. Without waiting for Raklas to finish speaking, it was immediately pierced by a root, yet didn't die, possessing an immortal regeneration ability. Even if Cho dodged, it couldn't be killed. Raklas smirked, revealing its sinister smile, and the sharp thorns of the trees immediately launched a relentless attack on Tintu, scratching it severely. But as Tintu rolled up its wings and struck back, shimmering dust particles emerged, creating a thunderous explosion. While the crowd was engrossed in this drama, only Yuria remained oblivious to what was happening. Hearing the sound of the 2 crazed individuals fighting, the 2 children nearby had to resort to wind magic to escape Tintu's grasp, immediately soaring into the sky. But they couldn't escape the sunlight, and 2 magic hands emerged, turning into sand, becoming the grasping hands of Raklas. Yet they couldn't catch the person, while Tintu continued to snarl behind. Raklas immediately warned, having sensed the limit of Tintu's endurance. If the attack continued, it would be like seeking a path to death. But it was too late. When the creature turned to look, half of its body had already transformed into tree roots, witnessing Tintu's gradual decay, soon to become a monster in the silent forest. Raklas immediately felt like it was about to die for sure. If Yuria found out it caused this mess, she would definitely get a taste of her own medicine. Its only option was to admit its mistake, as it had played too recklessly. It quickly resolved the misunderstanding, clarifying that it wasn't a demon lord or anything like that. Raklas wasn't even its name, it was just a surname. Despite whatever name it went by, there were countless others with the same name in the world, prompting Tintu to immediately realize its mistake. While it had been grappling with Raklas, Tintu quickly regained its composure, its face morphing back to normal from its tree-like appearance. Just as it was about to scold Cho for not understanding the situation before making a fuss, Yuria swiftly slapped it, causing a stinging sensation. She had been brought here because of her kindness, but the little rascal was trembling like a leaf, while Yuria was preaching to the crowd. Raklas immediately tried to reconcile, asking if it couldn't see what was happening, only to be kicked by Cho. Suddenly, a scream, shrill and desperate, came from the direction of the little fox. Instead of worrying about people fighting and getting hurt, It was concerned about its gemstone breaking. But Rakla shocked it by revealing there might not be any gemstone underneath. As the little fox died a little inside at that thought, Julia asked Tentu why it suddenly flew into a rage. She remembered it had taken its medication earlier. Then it quickly recalled a time 1,000 years ago, when it was still debating between choosing a sword or a shield as its weapon. It immediately saw a human wandering into the Tentu forest. At that moment, Tentu had stealthily approached an ancient tree to steal its leaves. But the leader spotted it and punished it. But because the little creature had an attachment to its secret weapon, it wanted to use the leaf to create it. However, the leader didn't allow it and ordered Tentu to drop it. Instead of obeying, the little creature selfishly clung onto the leaf, darting away at lightning speed, only later considering its weapon. Just as it had encountered the human, Tentu tried to ignore everything and let the leader handle it all. But inadvertently, its eyes met with that man's, who immediately turned to his ally. With Tentu's true nature exposed, despite its desire to leave when the man wanted to talk to it, it immediately turned back around. Afterward, they received a warm welcome from the fairyland, and even the leader felt genuinely happy because it had been a long time since humans had visited this place. The spirits bid them farewell before they departed, suggesting they could stay and enjoy themselves for a while. However, the real reason they came here wasn't just for leisure. It was because a fortune teller had said there was a talented blacksmith here. So they immediately understood the hint and looked towards Tentu, who was still hiding, likely being sought after. Although the little one appeared timid, the man seemed extremely cheerful, leading Cho to believe it would be easy to persuade Tentu. Thus, the game of cat and mouse began, with one seeking and the other hiding, right around the thick tree trunk. But just as Tentu thought the man had left, suddenly, its head bumped into something terrifying, a large face looming over it, causing Cho to panic and fly away in disarray. However, it didn't give up there. Time after time, day after day, month after month, the man continued to pursue Tentu until the little one was defeated by human food and the dramatic stories about defeating demon lords. But the demon lord was entirely different from the king of demons. The demon king was just the ruler of a tribe, nothing more. Seeing this, the man remained incredibly confident that he could defeat the demon lord because of his divine favor. When asked about his power, bestowed upon him by the church to vanquish demon lords, he nonchalantly affirmed that he wasn't even sure if that power existed, causing Cho's companions to gape in astonishment. The vampire immediately intervened, fearing this information would leak outside. However, this was the forbidden forest of the Tentu. How could a human enter? When asked about Tentu's age, the little one couldn't remember, as the concept of time for fairies and humans was entirely different. The man believed that tiny Tentu like this had lived almost as long as him. But Cho immediately refuted it, stating that if they had to calculate, Tentu's age would be multiple times that of a human's due to the cycle of life and death. But they quickly reverted to the initial topic, the source of their powers. If they didn't receive them from the churches, then where did heroes, adventurers, or hunters obtain their special abilities? However, they were still investigating. Therefore, without clear understanding of where the power came from, regardless of the ongoing issue, once again, let's retell a legendary tale about various things that I most enjoy hearing about. First, there was someone who played with me, which made the little me, who used to be withdrawn with the leaves, now feel the joy and excitement with this man. Immediately, I declared to choose one of the two. Daita had the ability to create coastal weapons, which became a special item. Therefore, I will give it to you, putting all the magic into it, which made that person extremely surprised. Why give them everything? But for the little me, that was trivial, because the rules couldn't go outside, interact with the world, so most of the fairies didn't care about what was happening outside. But after learning about the vast world through this man's storytelling, it looked at it differently and became more interested. Once the weapon had the power of Tentu's magic inside, it was like having Tentu actually beside, supporting. It would be easier to defeat the Demon King, and vice versa, if using that weapon carried. Although the little one was in the forest, it could still feel the world outside. That was a double-edged sword. Immediately, the demons prepared for the hero to choose a sword or a shield while the expedition team was in flames. The hero's body was inevitably overwhelmed, the consequences gradually becoming distorted. The power created it, and the pressure crushed it. The captain heard from a fortune teller that only that person entered the silent forest. Now from the darkness, there were two people in black throwing out and thanked the captain. He saved us and saved him too. Knowing that although Cho had arrived there, it was better to let the hero die as a hero than to fail miserably waiting for someone to save when there was no leader, they seemed to lose their goal, which was to assist the hero in becoming a warrior. But now the light was gone. They decided to live in the darkness. No one else. Those were the two teammates who were saved by the captain. Their eyes were determined. From now on, they would definitely live well to take revenge. Then they stayed in the forest for over a year, then left, making Cho Tientu cry all their tears, unable to stay for another 100 years. Where was the shield almost finished? But by then they had become demons forever. Where to go to destroy demons? Seeing the little one so sad, the hero made a promise that if he saw the two Tientus had completed the shield but hadn't defeated the demon king, he would come back and take the shield. After bidding farewell, Tientu still couldn't stop crying, repeatedly promising to complete the shield to protect them. Only the leader, who had almost promised something back then, was difficult to say, remaining silent and contemplative. So after 100 years, Tientu completed the shield and left the forest. But Reckless felt absurd, exclaiming, "You're freaking kidding me. You met that warrior 100 years ago, and it took another 100 years to make the shield. That's absurd." It seemed like the concept of time for Tientu was quite skewed because it spent all its days in the forest and didn't know what was happening outside. So the little fox, who had been quietly eavesdropping, suddenly became enlightened, realizing that it had met this butterfly before and immediately recalled the painful memories from about 6 years ago, when it was attacked by a group of people who turned out to be the ones attacking Tientu. The whole misunderstanding about Rakles was explained, but only one person remained bewildered, not understanding anything. This guy, who was originally peaceful, suddenly had a look of realization on his face. He was as happy as if he had found his mother coming back from the market, then immediately turned his eyes without asking or feeling anything, without a single wrinkle on his forehead. He was like a mobile zoo, so the demons immediately decided to kill them all. The book opened. Inside was a stream of light too fast, too dangerous, making Rakles unable to react in time. Luckily, the little fox jumped forward to block the blow and help them. Rakles had to admire. Even without gemstones, you're still quite useful. But looking closely, that was the special nature of believing foxes. Whether in magic or sorcery, it had no effect on them. Just seeing Rakles' eyes made the demon flinch in fear, quickly retreating, realizing that he was not an ordinary demon. Seeing its wings close, approaching the blind man, he breathed a sigh of relief. It was fortunate that he wasn't alone today, otherwise it would have been a big deal. Immediately, Rakles realized and turned to look behind to assess the situation of Yuria. Unexpectedly, the figure that emerged once again was none other than the blind warrior, with whom they had shared life and death in the silent forest. However, his eyes were now wide open, as he made a proposition. "Let's settle this with a dual-wielding match," he proposed, directing his swords towards Yuria. Instantly, a dark aura materialized and shrouded them both, isolating them from the outside world. Witnessing this, Rakles hastily charged forward, only to be repelled and thrown back outside. Realizing that attempting to breach the barrier was futile, he used his bloodthirsty gaze to fixate on the blind man, intending to deal with him first. In response, the demon channeled his power to further sharpen his already razor-sharp blades, launching them simultaneously. But the blind warrior's speed proved too swift to evade. Rakles couldn't even sense his opponent's magic. In the blink of an eye, another blade, distinct from his own, materialized behind him, striking with lethal precision. With a swift, powerful kick from his elongated, slender legs, the blind warrior sent the demon hurtling through the air, his face contorted in shock and disbelief as blood spurted from his wounds. "By the gods, this is the most formidable demon I've ever faced," he exclaimed. Fortunately, his comrades remained trembling like leaves in the wind, under the impression that Rakles was akin to Sun Wukong within their expedition team, given his newfound strength. However, as he glanced at the bewildered countenance of Yuria, he couldn't shake the thought that the foolish ones are often the most dangerous. Lost in contemplation, he failed to notice Raklas's ploy to distract him while dispersing his powers. Suddenly, a long, menacing object emerged from the depths of the forest below. Had it not been for his teleportation skills, he might have found himself peddling salt under a golden stream. Before him unfolded the spectacle of the forest being ravaged, the force pressing down like a relentless tide, while the blind warrior continued his futile search for Raklas. In a flash, the object materialized right before them, poised to shatter their adversary's defenses. "Let's see if you can find a way out," Raklas jeered, thrusting the demon against the wall with savage intensity, then transitioning seamlessly to tender affection as they engaged in playful antics, darting and weaving from one side to the other. On the inside, Yuria found herself awakening to a grim reality. She was bound by chains, and immediately, flashes of imagery illuminated her mind, depicting the blind warrior slaying Raklas. But just as swiftly, a crystal shard connected them, inflicting a wound on Yulia's chest. Suddenly, emerging from the darkness, the warrior appeared, wearing a despicable smile. "Awake, Haivong," he sneered. "The once mighty Thao Kao now finds himself in this predicament." Without delay, he declared that Yulia's companions had all met their demise, and that they would hold on to her life for their own purposes. Gripping Yulia's throat tightly, he appeared formidable. However, after a moment of contemplation, Yulia promptly retorted, "He delved too deep into my memories. Had he deceived me differently, perhaps he would have succeeded." She exuded confidence that she would not be defeated by anyone. The blood stains on her face evaporated instantly, much to the amusement of her assailant. Yet he couldn't fathom how he had inflicted such harm. Behind Yulia, however, the shattered remnants of 100 images lay scattered, revealing the true extent of the battle she had been waging. Issuing a challenge, the self-proclaimed seer picked up the shattered mirror from the ground. This artifact, known as the Dream Butterfly, possessed a misleading charm. It was capable of creating illusions, manipulating the minds of others. What surprised Yulia was that this mirror, along with the fox's crystal, share a common origin. They were both considered cursed relics, operating in direct contradiction to the principle of karma. He refuted Yulia's previous statement that such powers were ineffective against karma. They were indeed superior to it. Yet these principles held no sway over special artifacts like Yulia's necklace. If what had transpired in the illusions earlier was indeed true, then it would become reality and apply to the real world, potentially leading to Yulia's demise. This was the true power of the Dream Butterfly, to turn illusions into reality if the victim believed in them. Fortunately, Yulia had realized that everything was a falsehood. Otherwise, she might have met her end then and there. Yulia immediately exposed the truth by pointing directly into the head that this body was just a puppet to be manipulated and discarded. She regretted Chi's confidence, boasting about personality when all that mattered was the borrowed physical form, wasn't it? This made Cho, his associate, freeze stiff with disbelief. Little did he expect that his own thoughts were being read, and immediately his eyes became intensely deranged, as if wanting to devour Yulia. She knew this, she could see through him, and immediately his wildly indifferent gaze seemed as if wanting to chew and swallow one's soul. She knew she could see through. To what extent did she see it? Everything in this world is based on rules. Making Cho, Yulia immediately activated her brain to use all her vocabulary she had learned to explain. She knew the world around Tai was like a heart, probably because she was the lovable female lead. Sweet, cute, unparalleled. Flowers meet flowers bloom. People meet people lean over the water tank. So the negation village, it's not like the rules, he said, immediately based on the karma theory to dodge the law. Yulia immediately felt, hey, your buddy is about to celebrate his 20th birthday. Let's get back to our own story now. Immediately asking him, what are we doing? Are you going to kill me? But seeing that the guy knew clearly that he didn't have enough skills, he wanted to take advantage of this multi-dimensional space to confine her inside forever. Waiting for the day Yulia died of old age, immediately revealed a very pleased expression, but immediately was made sleepy by her indifferent attitude. Seeing Yulia intending to leave, he quickly reminded her that this place was the space it created, only one of them had to die to open it. But Yulia immediately let him see what the reality of life was, and then cracks appeared, hoping his miraculous charm wouldn't listen. Immediately shattered, as I said, didn't they? They don't work on me. Just seeing Yulia, the fish's head outside to call me, making it have to question extremely strongly, how can it get out? But that was as easy as turning the palm for her. and she ordered her disciple to stop harassing people, and Reckless obediently listened, but didn't care, dropping the one who was unconscious from the dizzying height. At this moment, he stood above witnessing the scene without lifting a finger to help, but he was extremely pleased because the guy who was supposed to be a burden managed to restrain Reckless until the last minute. Yuria quickly warned this wretched guy, not wanting to harm her, just being like a pervert trailing behind. Reckless quickly recognized this golden-headed guy, no one else. He was the warrior inside the silent forest, but just the body. Inside was someone else. Just as Reckless hit the ground over there, he immediately wanted to test him to eliminate the aftermath, to summon the holy sword. But this time was different from before. In just the blink of an eye, he was chopped into 100 pieces. His body burst open. But it was nothing compared to Reckless's super regeneration, using his own blood to crystallize back. Seeing it difficult to speak, harder than what he had speculated, he immediately boasted of the achievement he had just achieved, in the palm of his hand. Immediately the other one looked at him, turning his head with two deep-set eyes, stunning him. He quickly rushed at lightning speed, with an extremely confident demeanor, swinging his sword towards Reckless. Fortunately, it managed to dodge, flying up into the air, gaining momentum, and kicking straight down. Exactly as recently, this was just the body of a warrior, so it greatly surprised Cho, who directly grabbed Reckless's leg and threw him straight down into the forest below. When he just opened his eyes, he saw the sword right in front of him, which immediately pierced and made Cho slip down the mountainside before seeing the person gasped. Yet he remained autistic, soliloquizing inwardly. In the past 2,000 years, countless heroes were born as the strongest, but only 3 were notably outstanding, hailed as the strongest warriors, the fastest warriors, and the first warrior owner of this body. Therefore, he confidently believed this was an unbeatable illusion, impossible to fight against. But suddenly, out of nowhere, a flame emerged, attacking at lightning speed, causing that guy to quickly separate from Reckless. It was none other than a little fox who intervened, transforming into a giant super fox. "Hey, hold on there. I promised to help you find the Jade Stone Sword." After the fire gradually died down, he revealed his business-like demeanor. "Hello. This is the first time I've been able to create a blackout, take over the owner of that Jade Stone, making the nine-tailed fox remember something whenever we meet. We're old acquaintances." Reckless gently reminded Cho to remember where the Jade Stone was lying. Only he and Yuria knew. So he wanted to cooperate because currently only the fox could resist this guy, but in reality, this kind of power didn't belong to it, but was bestowed by the Jade Stone. So, if it didn't have that thing, it would just be an ordinary fox. So now, only a little bit of the Jade Stone's power remained on the fox to maintain its form. If it used that power to help Reckless, then the fox would truly be just an ordinary fox, unable to continue cultivating into a human. But the fox understood their current situation well. If it didn't intervene, they would all be dead, let alone transforming into a human. It wanted Reckless to promise that even if Cho turned into an ordinary fox, unable to understand human language, he would still have to find the Jade Stone for it. After both agreed, Reckless quickly flew away, leaving the nine-tailed fox to block this wretched guy, whose face was originally dark, but now revealed the appearance of sharp eyes, from the animal kingdom. From within the fire emerged an extremely beautiful figure, with pristine white fur, the true beauty of a nine-tailed fox. But this wretched guy still wanted to pursue and kill Reckless, aiming only for him. The fox firmly refused to let go. Luckily, it had just joined hands with the nine-tailed fox, so it immediately supported by spraying hellfire to protect its fur from being burned by this guy. He quickly tried to figure out how to avoid it, but carelessly fell into Reckless's trap. From the black circle below, sharp arrows immediately shot up, almost piercing its eye. Seeing him levitating in midair, the nine-tailed fox immediately conjured up many fireballs to prepare for training and target attacks. Standing amidst the formidable strength between the two, he made him spin around, leaving no time to prepare to use his special techniques. Of course, the two were not monsters waiting for a superhero transformation. Immediately, they made him swallow 2 fireballs directly in the face. But then, strangely, the back of the nine-tailed fox gradually turned black. Unexpectedly, its power was depleted prematurely to such an extent. While the situation below was tense, Yuria, the diminutive mushroom, tried to raise her head to warn them. That entity had transformed into someone else. It was as if when the dust settled, instead of the warrior's figure, it was replaced by a beautiful woman with a stunning figure. He seemed to have the 72 transformations of Sun Wukong, but transformed in an unpredictable way. It was the body of a warrior with a famous name in history, the only warrior with the double sword technique.